Welcome to the CMO Spotlight, and I am here with Alan Magee, who is the Vice President of Digital Marketing and Technology for Church's Chicken. Welcome, Alan.
Good morning, Joe.
Hey, you and I have known each other a long time, and I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today. And so I wanted to begin by, if you could just tell us a little bit about your career journey. I know you're a Clemson graduate, that you're a very proud Clemson University graduate and big fan of their sports, particularly their football program. But so after Clemson, tell us a little bit about your path.
Yeah, happy to. So after Clemson and undergrad, I actually did a master's in advertising at the University of Texas. So really thought my whole career was going to be really down the advertising track. And did this master's focused on strategic planning, account planning, deep into research, and then landed my first agency job here in Atlanta. And it was with Gray Worldwide at the time, and we had the Bell South account, so selling DSL and dial-up internet. Learned the agency trade for a couple years, and then moved over to the brand side pretty early in my career, over to Arby's Restaurant Group, and spent a number of years there focused on product development, research, insights, helping develop products like sandwiches and shakes and desserts, testing them, rolling them out, marketing strategy. And then that's really where I started to zigzag in my career. And that's kind of really been a theme in my career. So took a little bit of a zig over to Intercontinental Hotels Group and spent a number of years there and did a couple different roles. Some focused in business to business marketing, focused on sales, partnerships, performance, so hotel performance in there. And then also just brand marketing with a number of brands like Crown Plaza and Intercontinental, Holiday Inn, Hotel Indigo, so working across the portfolio. So I zigzagged a little bit inside of IHG, learning different things, like adding different tools to my tool belt, and then moved back into the restaurant space. Moved over to Focus Brands and led the brand marketing team for Moe's Southwest Grill. So everything from the culinary, the calendar, the media strategy, digital and loyalty. Again, focusing in some other areas in a different industry than what I had done in the hotel space. And that led me to where I'm at today at Church's Chicken, where I've been for almost 3 years, where I lead all things digital marketing and digital technology for the brand. So another kind of zag in there from deep brand management to going over to really deep into the digital space in restaurants, and also in a different category, moving from fast casual to QSR. So it's really been my trend of zigzagging in different types of roles, different types of brands, and really different industries.
So I have a question. First of all, QSR, for those quick serve restaurant, so more fast food versus fast casual, which is different category. You mentioned something when you were talking about your time at Focus Brands and particularly working on the Moe's brand, that you had some impact and responsibility for menu. And that's something I've heard a couple of times when we've done some CMO spotlights with some other restaurant brands, where marketing actually does have some impact on menu, and you don't just mean what goes on the menu and the menu board, you mean actual what product you sell in restaurant, right? So tell me about how marketing has some responsibility and impact on menu.
Yeah, so marketing, typically in most restaurant brands, the culinary part of the organization rolls up into marketing. So it's a real partnership working with our chefs. And it's a very research-driven approach. So one, understanding where are the gaps in your menu, what do customers want, what are they buying more of? Like, for instance, at Church's, where our customers are buying more boneless products versus bone-in. So how do we add more to that category? Is it with flavors, different types of boneless products, sauces, all those components? And then there's actually a lot of research that goes into it, where it's quantitative research to understand where there's demand, qualitative, where you're having people taste the product, you're doing focus groups, you're putting it out in market to see how it's selling, and if it is selling, what is it pulling from on the menu, what is it changing, are people buying more of, and then how do you actually roll it out and talk about it? And so marketing is pretty hands-on in this approach the whole way through, and it's all about that product development cycle, which sometimes can take anywhere from 8 to 18 months, depending on the product,
Wow.
because you've got to plan out things like supply chain and securing enough product. And some products, like something like shrimp that we sell during Lent at churches, you have to secure that product 8 months ahead of time. So you got to understand, go in there and do forecasting, and then what are other flavors that you need to add on to it, and then pulling it onto the calendar and how you actually market it. So from a marketing perspective, the whole menu aspect is super important. That's at the core of the brand.
It's crazy to me though, if you think about as an industry, I don't know of many other industries where marketing is involved in supply chain, for example. And so that it's kind of, I think, maybe unique to the restaurant industry in some ways that you'd have impact on, and also the other begs the question, how do you not gain 1,000 pounds? Because if you're always trying new food and sampling product, how do you keep from that happening too?
Yeah, that's you learn how to sample properly, and
Right. Small bites.
You never eat the full sandwich. So.
Right. Fair enough. Excellent. Well, so if you could just tell us a little bit about the church's organization. I know you've now been there for almost 3 years. So tell us how the church's organization has evolved, maybe in your 3 years there, and then where you are today.
Yeah, happy to. So a little background on Church's Chicken. We're an almost 70-year-old iconic QSR fast food brand. We were born and bred in San Antonio, Texas in 1952, and we're one of the very first fast food restaurant brands to franchise. It was very early on in the brand's history. We're known for our bone-in fried chicken, our Texas tenders, our chicken sandwich, honey butter biscuits, our jalapeno squeeze. So we have an incredible menu. We talk about, it's our down-home flavor. It's about comfort food. And I came in at the end of 2018 to really stand up the digital marketing team at Church's and to take us through a digital transformation. So we had been on the start of a brand turnaround with what we just talked about with menu from a culinary perspective, from a calendar perspective on what we're promoting and how. But we were a little bit behind the competition when it came to all things digital. And so came in and put us on a 3-year digital transformation roadmap that really covered everything from our paid media to our own channels like website and listings, to how we approach e-commerce with online ordering and delivery partnerships, how we look at customer data, launching things like CRM and social playbooks, also how we really approach PR and activation inside of the market using our social channels and using our restaurants. And so we stage gated out, and we're in the 3rd phase of that transformation now, and it's had some real impact on the business. So we've had 2 years of positive comp sales driving since 18, and had a really strong year even through COVID with e-commerce last year, and are on another positive streak this year.
I think you mentioned to me you have something like 1,200-ish stores, and you're not just here in the US, you're international as well, right? What other countries are you in, and do you have responsibility for the international stuff too, or just US?
I'm primarily domestic, so we have about 950 locations domestically. Internationally, we actually have about 500 additional locations, and it's everywhere from Canada to Mexico to Central America to Asia. The Middle East is very strong right now. And then we're expanding even to other countries like into Africa and into Europe. And so internationally, there is a huge appetite. Internationally, we're known as Texas Chicken. So we actually have 2 different brands in the US. We're Church's Chicken. Everywhere else, we're known as Texas Chicken. And some different menus. We do a lot more spice there internationally, more handheld products, sometimes some other day parts, even like breakfast. So we support internationally strategically, but I'd say that 98% of my time is hands-on here in the US.
I like what you did there, Alan. You said there's a huge appetite for Texas chicken internationally. Okay, so I'm curious if there's a piece of advice that you wish that you got early in your career, or maybe advice you would give to, we both work with some younger marketers that are fresh out of school. What advice would you give to them if they're just starting out in their careers?
Yeah, that's a really great question. the piece of advice that I would give is, as you think about each role and each opportunity that you move throughout your career, think about it of what are you adding through there? What do you want to learn? What do you want to develop onto that opportunity? In some roles, it's going to be very hard skills, right? Something in digital where you're going to learn something really deep in digital or media or marketing strategy. But other roles might be more of those soft skills where you're focused on leadership or collaboration or project management, presenting, training, things like that. And so when you move into new roles, whether it's you've been promoted or you've moved in the organization or you move to a new company, I always tell people really identify what are those 2 to 3 things that you want to focus on, that you want to get out of this by the time that you leave that role. And it's okay if they're not all hard skills. A lot of roles you take to develop those soft skills in.
So I believe that everybody has a superpower, and I'm just curious what you feel your superpower is.
I think my superpower is being able to connect the I'd say the strategy, the big ideas up here, all the way down to the actual tactics of how they come to life. And I'd say that that's not an easy thing to do because you've got to stay in this middle ground where you've got to toggle between the overarching big idea and the strategy and then getting in the weeds and how that actually comes to life. And some people really want to hang up high and some people really want to get down low in the execution. But being in that middle part is something that I've learned to do pretty well throughout my career.
Well, and that actually brings me to another question that is, it feels like when you begin your career, a marketing career, often you start as a specialist in something, right? I'm a specialist in email or in social media or content or PR or video or something. And then as you progress in your career and you start to manage people, those specific tactical skills become less important, and those soft skills that you mentioned become more important, the people skills. So I'm curious, have you felt that transition as you've grown in your career where you may not be an expert in every single thing that your team is doing, you just have to be good at managing that team and knowing enough to be able to guide them when they need help?
100%. And I learned that really middle point in my career working at IHG, where it was a big multi-matrix corporation. And even if you didn't have a team underneath you, you still had to work with maybe 7 different parts of the organization to get something done. So being able to figure out how to work with people, build relationships, collaborate, those soft skills there. And then learning when you do start to manage people, how do you manage them? How do you manage your workload with their workload? And how do you make all that work together? Eventually, as you go through more leadership roles, then you start to get more comfortable. You figure out kind of your playbook for that. And that's where you find, you want someone that's going to be an expert in something, right? And then you're there to help coach them and bring them along and be a support system for it. And how do you really bring in experts on your team and then helping elevate them along the way? So it's something that I think is just learned, and you have to do it. And there's everyone's a little different. Every brand's a little different as you learn it.
That's great. So in terms of we're in a place in history and time where we're hopefully on our way exiting a pandemic as more people are getting vaccinated and more people are getting back to work and busy. I'm curious, just putting that aside, you mentioned you were all pretty busy during pandemic because you had, for example, e-commerce and mobile ordering and drive-through in many cases, and ways that people could get your product without necessarily coming in and having a full-on dining experience. But I'm just curious, what's your biggest challenge as a marketer, not necessarily even during the pandemic, but just in this point in time, what's your biggest challenge that you're facing today?
I'd say it's the combination of people and technology. And this is what happens when you might be a little more of a traditional brand. You're starting to add technology at a rapid pace, and it's where people plus technology get intertwined. And sometimes people feel like technology will replace something that a person does, but really it adds on to it. And so how do we bring technology in at the right pace? How do we at the restaurant level, at the brand level, at the franchisee level, make sure that everyone is engaged with technology, and that these real life digital experiences are the real life and digital experiences are as seamless and similar as possible.
So where does your team, where do either you or your team find inspiration?
You know, we talk a lot about finding inspiration, one, outside of our brand, outside of our industry, and seeing what's new that's out there that could apply to us. And I think that's where you come up with really great ideas. So I'm always encouraging our team to network, to go to webinars, to go to conferences, to talk to other people, whether it's in industry or out of industry, and try to bring those new ideas in. So we do a lot of reading of different articles, or talking about things that are trending that maybe are like really far outside of our space, but is there something that we can glean out of that maybe we bring in 3 months later, that's some sort of insight.
I'll also add that I know you, personally, that you are very open, more open than many marketers, to have conversations with potential partners, potential vendors, things like that. And it feels like you're also leveraging those conversations, not just, for partially because you're using it as a discovery process to see if there's something new or different that you could or should be using or engaging with.
100%. I love to have conversations with, whether it's agency partners, whether it's technology partners, entrepreneurs, and just kind of learn about their product, learn about what they're offering, but also you get insight into who are they working with and how is that brand using this. And I always like to try to figure out, like I said, what's underneath the hood. So I might see a very cool marketing promotion. I'm like, how'd that come to life? And then as I have conversations, I figure out, okay, it was these 2 or 3 partners that brought this to life. And it's like, okay, this is how it could all work together. So I love to have those conversations, and it's I gain a lot out of them. And then it also sets me up for potential partners that I might be adding in at some point later, later down the line.
I love it. So I'm curious what values either you want to demonstrate as a leader, or are there certain values that you demand from somebody that you might hire to your team?
Yeah, as a leader, I really value positive energy and encouragement. And I really take a coaching mindset when I work with my team. And so it's all about getting them ready for the game, how to help them build confidence, how to help them grow in their careers, whether it's in their role or just long-term down the line. I also, I learned a long time ago around this book, The 1 Minute Manager, if you've ever read it.
Oh, yeah.
I still use a lot of those principles today. And the 1 Minute Manager is all around managing the project versus managing the person. And I still use that with my team, and I talk to them about that up front, and they understand that. So I might be really hands-on in one project, a little more hands-off in another, and that way, and that could also evolve down the line. So that's something that I do use as a principle with leadership, leading my team.
I love that. And what is was that the book with the feedback sandwich, where you give a positive, you give the criticism, and then you finish with a positive?
Yeah.
Like it. Nice. So I want to shift gears a little bit. As you know, setup is a marketing matchmaker, and often that means that we're connecting brands and marketing agencies together. So we sort of live in that space in between marketing agencies and brands. We're not in either group, but we sort of help connect them together. So I'm just curious about how you, either throughout your career or even now at churches, work with agencies. How do you view your agency relationships?
Yeah, we at churches, we work with a number of agencies. I think we have about 7 different key agency partnerships. And that's not including technology partners that are semi-agencies for us too. All of our partners specialize in different areas of our business. So at churches, we'd say a small but scrappy marketing team. And so our agencies are partners. They're an extension of our team. And I've throughout my career, as I've moved to different brands, we have some things that we've brought in-house, some things that we've outsourced, and I've lived with it both ways. And so being able to understand that, and it's just a different fit. There's no right or wrong. It's what's right for your situation and your brand and what you need with agency partners.
So that actually leads me to another question, which is, are there certain disciplines within marketing that you feel you would almost always want to outsource because you like the external perspective that you get, or that you would never ever outsource because you feel it's so core to your business that you couldn't possibly, let somebody from outside give you, impact that directly?
I'd say that the thing that I probably would never outsource would be brand strategy. And I really think that brand strategy needs to be driven internally from that internal brand leadership. Not to say they can't have outside perspectives coming in, but that's got to be owned inside the brand. Most everything else, in all honesty, be 100% open to outsourcing it, whether it's anything from a tactical perspective, also from strategy perspectives on certain parts of the business where you've got experts in there. And and then also, even if there were roles that you couldn't fill internally, of having a partner play that role almost as part of your internal team. So I see strengths in that, a lot of diverse thinking from different client bases that they have, past experience that they can bring into your business.
And you mentioned, hey, at churches, we're working with 7-ish agencies plus some technology partners that do some different things. I'm curious if you can just give us an example of some of those buckets. Not, you don't have to name the agencies, but are there certain functions that you're relying on an agency for? Like, hey, we need help with CRM from this agency, and what are some of those functions?
Yeah, so we have one agency that's really, I'd say, our brand marketing and lead advertising agency. So what are the big ideas and campaigns? And then we have a digital AOR that focuses on all things digital creative, social, CRM, and there are experts in there. And then merchandising, printing, PR. We have 2 PR agencies based on B2C and B2B. So as you look at that, kind of the experts in there, then that lines up well with what we have internally, where we have internal leaders that have each parts of those businesses.
So the internal leader is kind of the domain expert in that area or discipline, and then they may have an agency that supports them to be an extension of them as their team kind of thing.
Right.
Love it. I love it. Okay, so we often talk in marketing about, we're often viewed in marketing as a cost center versus a value driver. And so I'm curious, over the years, how have you demonstrated marketing to maybe the non-marketing, functions within the organization, or people within the organization who think marketing spends a lot of money and it's sort of a black box and we don't know if the money is wasted? So how do you demonstrate value to those kinds of people?
Yeah, I think, Joe, it comes down to me about storytelling, right? As marketers, we're all about the metrics, and we can put 30 metrics on a slide, but if the metrics don't, if a leadership or someone that's a non-marketer doesn't quite understand what the metrics actually mean, I think that's where that gap comes in that you talk about. And so, as marketers, we're really good getting the quantitative side of stuff. What is the ROI? But then what's the story around the why behind it, or the how? So even in the restaurant space, we're talking about attribution nowadays. So how does our digital media, how is it being tracked to attribute to someone that actually showed up to a restaurant that we're able to track, right? And how do we know that we change their behavior? And so it's all around that storytelling, helping people understand of the why, and then this is the what, and this is what that metric actually means. Is this ROI a good ROI just because it's positive, right? Could it be better? How does it level set against the rest of the industry or a competitor? And so it's all that context around it. And sometimes I think we get hung up in the numbers too much, and just what that hard number is, without actually spending the time to help craft that story in the mind of the person that we're telling it to.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's a good approach. So I'm curious, either at churches or in one of your previous lives, if there's a campaign or program that taught you a huge amount, either because it was wildly successful, great, but I think sometimes we even learn more if it was a huge flop and it taught us some valuable lesson we really needed to know. So I'm curious if there was something, like if there's something that springs to mind when I say, what's the campaign that taught you the most in your career? What comes to mind?
I'd say, one that I go back to, and I was actually talking about this with somebody just the other day. is when I was at IHG, I was leading our BMW Motorsport Global Partnership. So this is working
Wow.
with BMW across global regions with their race teams. They had different race teams in different regions. One was here in the US, one is Germany, one in the UK. And we've been given this partnership to say, okay, work with this. We're going to sponsor their race teams, figure out how to drive some revenue through this because we're not getting any revenue through BMW. And so it took a while to kind of figure out how do we approach this? How do we approach it a little bit differently? And what I learned through it, I worked on it for 2 years, is how to really get to mutually beneficial partnerships. And a lot of times people look at brands or other partners look at it from what am I getting out of it? But being able to work with the BMW team, it was figuring out what are their needs, what do they want out of it? How can we help bring them to the middle ground? And then when we were able to get them to the middle, we were able to then get to our needs. And it wasn't as much around back and forth. It's always around collaboration, partnership, and what are the things that maybe were the soft things that matter to them that, we would have said, oh, we really don't care about that, but that was the thing that got them to the table. And also I did a lot of work with working with their headquarters out of Munich and had, learned around the role of culture and business. And
Oh, wow. Yeah.
business is done maybe a little bit differently in certain countries like Germany, and there's nuances to it around how to ask for something, how to work with certain people and how to build relationships. And so I learned a lot from that. I was able to take and apply to a lot of other things down the line.
I love that you did it again, Alan. You said you were trying to drive value from the BMW relationship. Okay, I've got a couple of questions that are just completely for fun. So first is there a band or a book or a movie or a quote or a TV show that really inspires you or is gives you great enjoyment?
Yeah, so a band that I reference a lot, and one because I'm a huge fan of theirs, is Bon Jovi. And one, I love their music, but what I think is cool about their history and path is they've continued to reinvent themselves every decade. Where it was the '80s with hair rock to '90s, where they had to evolve as music changed, and people that maybe didn't follow them in the '90s, all the way to 2000s, where they got into country. But also they're incredible entertainers, and so I just have a high appreciation for Bon Jovi.
It sounds like your doggy is a big Bon Jovi fan too.
Big fan over there.
I love it. I love it. So outside of your family and your dog, where do you find joy? Do you have any major hobbies, or what do you like to do? We know you're a large college football fan. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I'm a big college football fan, but one of my big passions is travel and new experiences. So love to travel, check out new places, try new food, learn history, go through those experiences, and I think that just drives a lot of inspiration and thinking. And so travel is a key thing that I always look forward to. Always, while you're on one trip, you always plan the next, and that's the way that we approach it.
It's also nice to have something to look forward to, your next trip every time. I'm curious if there's a brand that you've never worked on that you really admire, and what is it about it that you really admire?
So, brand that I admire that I found real interesting, and I've gotten engaged with, I'd say over the last 18 months, is Blue Bottle. And so I'm a coffee guy. I like my coffee. I like to try different types of coffee. Got into kind of making it at home. And Blue Bottle's a pretty cool brand because one, they've got a great product, they've got a great visual identity, content strategy, positioning, and the coffee space is super crowded. You've got big national brands, you've got local players. There's a lot in there, and they've found a way to really stand out and find their sweet spot in the middle. And so I like a lot of what they do. I'm just a big fan of the brand.
What can you describe what it is? Is it just coffee, like a subscription service, or what is the brand about?
Yeah, so they've got it's a combination. They have a subscription service for coffee, so they'll send you different coffees over certain time periods. They've got products where you can make coffee at home, whether it's between grinders and cold brew makers and kettles, like all of this stuff. But then they also put out really good content to kind of teach you how to how to be a master brewer almost with coffee. And so they've kind of pulled all this together, but it still feels very, it doesn't feel corporate at all. It feels very niche still, even though they are a bigger player in the industry.
I love it. All right. I've got a curveball question for you. Is there a fictional story or a realm in which you would like to live other than the realm that we're living in today?
So the fictional realm, it's kind of a real realm, but it's also fictional, is the Big Brother house. So
Oh, wow. Like the TV show, right?
TV show, I'm a big Brother fan. I've been watching it for decades now, and that's always been something that I thought would be super cool. And here's why: is because Big Brother's a game. It's kind of like the business world. It's all about gameplay, where you've got to build alliances, you've got to collaborate, you have to be thinking 3 steps ahead of what you should be doing this week versus the next week, and then also really like learning all your metrics, your history, your numbers, so that you can win competitions. So there's a lot that goes into it, and the whole strategic side of stuff where you're just constantly thinking strategy. I think that would be really fun. But I think I've aged out of being able to get on Big Brother. I'm not 22, so
I don't know about that. I mean, if any Big Brother casting directors are watching, then Alan Magee is your guy. He may be a great candidate for your next season. I love it. So I'm curious if there's anything that I didn't ask you as part of this conversation that you wish that I asked, or maybe that I should ask in future conversations like this.
The one question that I was hoping to ask is, do you have a mantra or a quote or something like that you like to follow? And the one that I like that I've been stuck on for a little while is progress over perfection. And we talk a lot about that internally with our teams. And perfection is really unachievable. And perfection, if you do get there, only lives for a very short period of time. So what we need to focus on, whether it's personally or in business, whatever you're doing, is how do you just take that one step forward every single day, and all those little steps of progress ultimately get you to one big end goal. So that's kind of the mantra that I really follow right now.
I love that. Progress over perfection, something we should all focus on. And I think if we do that, we'll have better output in our work, and we'll also be happier with that output, personally. Well, I want to thank you. So Alan Magee is the Vice President of Digital Marketing and Technology for Church's Chicken. I have absolutely loved this conversation. Thank you so much for the time, Alan.
Yeah, thanks so much, Joe. This is great.